I Called Him Magoo is the 20th episode of season 7 of Two and a Half Men. This is directed by James Widdoes, and as always, there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode chronologically and share some thoughts. To be honest, I don't really care for this episode. There's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing about it that I can point to as being badly done. It's kind of boring. Not a lot happens. Maybe we have some interesting moments with Charlie, which I'll talk about, not necessarily funny moments. I don't think there was anything in this that I found to be particularly funny, but maybe an interesting moment with Charlie. It starts off with Lyndsey and Alan in bed. Eldridge is interrupting. It's a really long intro, not that interesting, but at least it establishes that Lyndsey and Alan are seeing each other. We then have some interaction back at the house between Berta and Alan, which I think could have been the funniest moment. I still didn't find it that funny, but Berta in general just usually is very funny. So I guess that's the highlight, but even then that wasn't that great. And then Alan asks Charlie to watch Jake, as Alan has a date. But Jake's grounded. Charlie's not going to do this. The next thing we see is Alan trying to sneak out of the house in his car, but the garage door keeps closing as he tries to open it. I'll be honest, I didn't work out what was going on, and it's so obvious once it's revealed. It was Charlie, because Charlie said, "No, I'm not watching your kid." So Charlie was trying to stop him. Funny, not really, clever. Yeah, I quite enjoyed that moment. And this doesn't stop Alan. He flees the scene. And we see him in the car with Lyndsey. It seems like things are not going to go very well for their night because it's Lyndsey's time of the month, which means that Alan's not necessarily going to get the sex he wants. And then Charlie's in bed with his paid-for girlfriend. This is Jasmine, played by Elizabeth Ho. And initially, that seems like Charlie's back to his old ways of just renting a date for the night. But that does get quite interesting, which I'll talk about in a moment. We're then at the hotel with Lyndsey and Alan, of course, and Lyndsey's not having a good time of it, so Alan is on his own in the room. He decides to order room service. And yeah, maybe this bit was funny as well. I didn't laugh, but it's mildly amusing. We hear him ordering room service. Well, we see him. Lyndsey can hear him. But as he's ordering the champagne and all of the food, he's pulling it out of his bag. It's classic Alan. He doesn't have to pay for the room service, but it can look like he actually spent the money and made the effort for Lyndsey. So, yeah, I guess that moment was mildly funny. Again, I didn't laugh, but I can certainly identify a comedic moment there. And then we're back with Charlie, and this is the bit where it gets quite interesting. And Charlie is trying to get Jasmine to start a fight with him so that they can have makeup sex, which is apparently Charlie's favourite type of sex. And it's quite interesting because it's very clear to Charlie, or clear to us rather, that Charlie is more interested in a real relationship than he is with meaningless sex, which is not Charlie of season 1, season 2, season 3, maybe even a couple of seasons after that. So it definitely is an interesting look at his character, and this is actually carried across into the morning, which I'll talk about in a moment. Before we get there, we have a brief scene in the hotel with Lyndsey and Alan. Alan now needs to rush to the bathroom because he'd been eating the oysters. Again, not funny, but it's fine. And then we have a scene back at the house, and Jasmine is making Charlie breakfast. This is all the service he's paying for, but it's so interesting that he's now paying for the marriage experience, really, or the committed relationship experience, which I just think is such an interesting look at Charlie's character. And this is not the first time that we're seeing this with Charlie, that we're seeing him more interested in wanting a real relationship than just meaningless sex. But certainly the more we see it, I think the more it feels like we've really turned a corner. And it's unlikely that Charlie will ever go too far in the opposite direction. Though, of course, nothing is impossible. And he even gives Jake into trouble for sneaking out, even though Charlie told him to. And it's kind of like he's trying to simulate this family experience. And I just think it's really fascinating. Again, not necessarily funny, but definitely very interesting. And then we end with Lyndsey and Alan in the car. Lyndsey said that actually she had a good time, a hotel, room service, kind of no teenagers. I guess it was better that she was doing all of that with Alan in the hotel than on her own at home with teenagers getting in the way. So it's nice that we're kind of showing that maybe there's something more in their relationship, but I'll talk more about that as the episodes go on. And then Alan drives off quickly because he needs the bathroom again. So it's not a bad episode necessarily. It's a really great look at Charlie's character. It's a nice way to show that maybe there's something deeper that could develop between Lyndsey and Alan. That's maybe not just a one-time thing. So it's certainly fascinating. I think it's laying the groundwork quite well. But it definitely isn't the most entertaining or funny episode. And unfortunately, the previous episode was not necessarily the most interesting either. So we're at a bit of a snag, but it's not the end of the world. It's not a bad episode. I called him Magoo. May not be the most entertaining, but there are still some good moments. And ultimately, I wouldn't skip it. If I'm binge watching season 7, I don't think I'd skip it. It's still a pretty decent episode of 2.5 Men.